My name is Jeff Wilkinson. I'm a native Richland Countyan. I live in Lexington, and I attended Kent State University and got a degree in soil and water conservation. I worked in South Dakota State Forestry for 3 years and then had the opportunity to come back into Richland County and apply for the position, the Richland County Soil and Water District. And I was hired in, I believe it was March or April of 1980. At the time, they didn't have a title, so we had to come up with a title, and the title ended up being the District Program Administrator. And I worked at the district from April of 1980 all the way through just about 1989, middle part of about 1989. I left and took a position with the Richland County Board of Elections. Back in the day when I worked at the Soil and Water District, there were no cell phones, there were no computers, everything was done by hand, and I hired on as, again, the district program administrator, but in our office there were 4 people. It was known as the Soil Conservation Service back in those days, and there was a district conservationist, there was a technician, and a district secretary, and myself. So a lot of my time was spent with the district technician. I was the rod man. So we would go out and survey for waterways, animal waste facilities, spring developments, farm ponds, tile drainage projects. My role as a district program administrator was a large part environmental education, and with my background in forestry that I had, I started up quite a few different field days with forestry related topics. We did some actual logging jobs. I worked with a lot of different schools throughout the county. We started school forests with the counties where the state would donate 1,000 trees and we would have the kids plant them. They would donate an acre of land. So we started about 5 or 6 of those as a district program administrator. Probably one of the biggest things that I was involved with, and it was probably in the mid-1980s, was there was a tornado and a couple big storms that went through Richland County, and Shelby flooded. And of course, today, the Black Fork Improvement Project is pretty much a pretty big thing, and it's self-funded by, I believe, a bunch of landowners. But back in our day, it wasn't. So after that big storm and the big flood, we got with the city of Shelby and a state representative. His name was Frank Sawyer, and he allocated through the Capital Improvements Project $25,000 towards that project. So it was, I believe, the summer of 1986 that I started at the headwaters of the Black Fork, and I walked the entire length of the Black Fork. It took me all summer, and I didn't do it every day, but people would drop me off at one point, and I would say at 3 o'clock, pick me up at the next road. Again, no cell phones, so if you got there early, you waited. If you got there late, they waited. So we mapped all the log jams, and we worked with quite a few of the landowners in that respect. We never got to the point where we did anything other than we had some demonstrations on clearing log jams. One of the biggest highlights was we were up on Bowman Street at the Newswanger farm, an Amishman. He had a bunch of log jams, and we had a guy who proposed to blow them up. So we set a bunch of charges in this log jam, and we actually blew one up, and it didn't work as good as we thought it would because it was too loose. It needed compacted where you had to take a chainsaw and cut it down, but we didn't do that. But that got the ball rolling with the Black Fork Watershed Improvement Project, and it was pretty interesting walking the entire length of the Black Fork because it starts in Ontario, heads north, and then east, and then back south again to Charles Mill Reservoir. So that was probably one of my highlights. And other than that, we had the tree packet program. And when I first started, we were in with 5 other counties, and Richland was the hub, and we would go to the Rural Life Center and pack all the trees, and then they would take theirs back to their counties and sell them. And the district was funded by the county commissioners. And the first secretary I worked under, she was wanted to always be real secretive, and we can't have the news media in, we can't do this. And I said, hey, how else are we going to toot our horn, if you will? So I started to get to the news media, at least send releases that we were having meetings. And then we worked with the county commissioners because, again, our funding came from there, and we had a state match. And we would have county commissioner tours. We got a bus from RTC, a small one, and we would drive around the county and show them all the different things that we did in terms of soil and water conservation so that they knew what we were doing. And that worked out pretty good because our budget increased over the years, and it helped out quite a bit. I'd say the biggest change from when I started in 1980 to right before I left in 1989 was the advent of the computer. The Soil Conservation Service got computers, and they had to enter in all their stuff on the computers. The district still typed everything on a typewriter or wrote it up by hand, and it was real close to the advent of the cell phones. So that was probably one of the biggest changes. And one of the other changes that I noticed when I was getting ready to change careers was a lot of the old-time farmers were getting out of the business and they were selling their farm. And that's when a lot of the Mennonites and the Amish started to move into northern Richland County. So today, that's a big area up there of Mennonites and Amish folks. And a lot of the people that I worked with over the years back in the 80s have passed away. One of my mentors was Dean Swigert. He was a Soil Conservation Service technician, and he taught me a lot about how the district formed and all those kind of things. So that was a pretty good experience with that.